Hello, 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 all. Please make sure you hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons, right? So you can get all the new content when I go live. Please hit the like and share. America needs to delete the current Supreme Court makeup as we know it. They just need to, right? We need to expand it and add more liberal thinkers who represent the broader American electorate. We just do. And I'm not talking about abolishing the Supreme Court completely, just keeping it fair by making it evenly represented. And I'm talking about getting rid of this current setup, because we have to, where these 9 people hold an enormous amount of power. 6 conservatives, 3 liberals, and the rest of the country is expected to accept that arrangement for decades because 9 justices have somehow become sacred. It's not sacred. 9 is not in the Constitution. Congress determines the number of Supreme Court justices, and Congress has changed that number before. The court started with 6 justices. The number has been as low as 5 and as high as 10. And we've had 9 since 1969. So expanding the Supreme Court is not some unconstitutional scheme Democrats invented because they're mad about a few decisions. The question is whether there's enough reason to do it now. And I believe this court has given us more than enough reason for us to expand the court in a way that will help the American electorate. The first reason is simple. This court is too ideologically lopsided for the amount of power that it has. We have 6 conservative justices and 3 liberal justices making decisions that affect more than 300 million Americans. I don't expect the Supreme Court to match the results of the latest opinion poll, and I don't expect every American to see themselves personally represented by the justices. That is not the court's job. But I also don't believe one conservative legal philosophy should have this much control over constitutional questions that affect everybody else for potential decades. Let's stop pretending the ideological slant that this court has doesn't matter just because these people wear robes, okay? Republican presidents deliberately nominate conservative judges. Democrats presidents deliberately nominate more liberal judges, more liberal philosophies. Senators fight over those nominations because they know those philosophies matter. Voters are told during presidential elections that Supreme Court appointments are at stake. Everybody understands the politics involved in this until a person gets confirmed, and then suddenly we're supposed to pretend these justices dropped out of the sky without any kind of philosophy or any kind of political slant at all. I want more liberal thinkers on the Supreme Court because I want that 6-3 conservative control broken up. I'm not hiding from that argument, not at all, because there's no reason to hide from it. I don't want 9 liberals replacing 9 conservatives. That ain't what I want either. I want a court where 6 conservative justices cannot continue controlling majority congressional questions simply because the present structure gives them a permanent numerical advantage. And look at the kinds of questions this court is deciding. They decided one today, mail-in ballots. We aren't talking about minor disagreements here over technical regulations. We're talking about how much immunity a president has from criminal acts, official conducts. We're talking about how easily lower courts can stop presidential actions. We're talking about voting rights. We're talking about congressional districts involving Black voters getting eliminated. We're talking about all kinds of things. that they are voting for, they're making judgments on. These are decisions about power, and it's too much of the final authority over that particular power, and it's concentrated too much in this one ideological slant. The presidential immunity case should have been one of the biggest warnings. That should have been our big warning right there against the presidential, the political leanings of the court. That should have been our number one. Okay, I guess it was Trump versus United States. The Supreme Court held that a former president has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct within his core constitutional authority, and at least presumptive immunity for other official acts. That decision does not just belong to Donald Trump. That doctrine belongs to every president who comes after him. That is exactly the kind of decision that makes the composition of the Supreme Court so important. A president already has enormous authority. The president commands the military, directs the executive branch, appoints federal officials and judges, conducts foreign policy, and oversees federal law enforcement through the executive branch. When the Supreme Court creates additional constitutional protection around an official presidential conduct, I want as broad and balanced a group of legal thinkers and legal minds as reasonably possible, deciding where those protections begin and where those protections end. Y'all please hit the like and subscribe button, please. I don't care whether the president is Donald Trump or somebody else. The rule has to work both ways. Any power you give a president, you will eventually belong to a president. It will eventually go to a president that you can't stand. Okay? That is why the court's job in these cases is so important. And it's also why I don't want a 6-3 ideological majority controlling those questions for the foreseeable future. Then we had Trump versus Casa. That decision restricted the ability of federal district courts to issue universal injunctions. The Supreme Court held that those injunctions likely exceeded the equitable authority Congress has granted federal courts when they provide relief beyond what is necessary for the actual plaintiffs. The court was not deciding whether Trump's underlying birthright citizenship order was constitutional in that particular case. It was deciding how broadly lower courts could stop executive action. That distinction matters, but so does the practical effect. When a president announces a policy that the lower courts believe is unlawful, the ability of those courts to stop the policy nationwide can matter tremendously. If relief becomes narrow, more people may have to sue. More litigation may be necessary, and more times can pass while the policy is being challenged. See, the thing is, this administration is being sued on all fronts because of these policies that they put into place, and they've given the president such broad immunity. All of this matters because government actions can have consequences before the Supreme Court even gets around to deciding the final issue. If an unlawful governmental policy operates for months before it's stopped, those months don't disappear. That's why I'm concerned whenever the court strengthens presidential room to operate while limiting one of the tools lower courts have used to restrain executive action. Now put that aside beside what is happening right now with voting rights. On August 24th, today, the same 6-3 court gave the Trump administration an important victory involving his executive order on mail-in ballots. I want to be exact about what happened because I don't need to exaggerate this, right? The court did not rule that Trump's entire mail-in voting order is constitutional. It said that the Democrat-led states challenging portions of Trump's order had sued prematurely because they had not yet shown sufficient concrete harm. So basically what the courts ruled against today was the Democratic states, Trump was going to issue an executive order against mail-in ballots. The Democratic states sued ahead of that executive order. The Supreme Court just said your suit is not, there's no suit for you to bring because the Trump administration hasn't put the executive order out yet. So you guys can't sue before he puts the executive order out. So when Donald Trump puts the executive order out in order to restrict mail-in ballot, the Democratic states are going to sue, and there's going to be an injunction against that mail-in ballot, against that executive order. The reason why it seems like it's a big deal today is because people don't understand that the executive order that Donald Trump put into place hasn't been executed yet. It has to be executed before the Supreme Court can rule on it. And the Supreme Court said it's not been executed, so we can't rule on it. So it's not a big major deal, but it's a big major deal because he's trying to restrict something that belongs to the states. And I understand most of y'all was bitching about, we need to let the states handle this. Okay, if y'all know that the states need to be handling mail-in ballots, then y'all need to push back against Donald Trump trying to seize mail-in ballots, trying to seize the state's power. Okay, this is an injunction. The injunctions remain and the litigations continue against Donald Trump's executive order that he thinks he's going to be able to put into place. But they've already slapped down mail-in ballots before. This is not really a win for Donald Trump. It's just a win that he can order executive mail-in ballot, but that don't mean they're going to let him. 9 times out of 10, they probably ain't going to let him. But look at what the administration was attempting to do. This executive order would allow the federal government to develop citizenship information for voter verification, direct changes involving the Postal Service and mail-in ballots, and prioritize prosecution involving certain election practices. Some portions remain blocked, while other parts have now been allowed to move forward while the legal fight continues. And we're doing this right before the midterms, right? That is what bothers me. Mail voting isn't some experimental voting system we found on Temu last year. Americans have been voting by mail for years and years. And this is what this goofy administration don't seem to get. Most Republican older people vote by mail-in ballot. You're going to disenfranchise all your mail-in ballot people. You're going to disenfranchise your mail-in ballot people. The Republican mail-in ballot people, the young people that are motivated to come out and vote are going to go to the polls and vote early, often, and swifter. You're disenfranchising the Republican base who like the mail-in ballots. Older people use it, disabled veterans use it, military people use it. They all use absentee ballots. Americans overseas use it, rural voters use it, people who work long hours use it, Republicans use it, Democrats use it. Mostly older Republican people use it. When we tell Democrats to come out and physically vote, they usually come out and physically vote. Donald Trump himself has voted by mail. If somebody commits voter fraud, prosecute them. If somebody steals ballots, prosecute. Somebody votes illegally, prosecute. I have no problem with enforcing election laws. What I have a problem with is using unsupported claims of widespread voter fraud to justify making a legitimate method of voting harder for the American people. So, and more confusing, especially before an election. The Constitution gives states important responsibility over election administrations, and it gives Congress substantial authority over federal elections. That means presidential attempts to insert executive power into the machinery of voting deserve serious scrutiny. The president is also the leader of the political party with a direct interest in who controls Congress. That alone should make us extremely careful about allowing this executive branch, this president, to change election procedures. And when disputes over this presidential authority move through the courts, where can they ultimately end up? Right back before these 9 Supreme Court justices. That is my problem. The same court is dealing with presidential immunity, executive authority, and power of lower courts and voting. That is an extraordinary concentration of responsibility. And 6 of the 9 people making those decisions share a general conservative judicial philosophy. Then there's the Voting Rights Act. This didn't begin yesterday. In Shelby County, Shelby County versus Holder in 2013, the Supreme Court struck down the formula used to determine which jurisdictions were subject to federal pre-clearance before making certain election changes. That effectively disabled the pre-clearance system unless Congress enacts a new full coverage formula. The importance of pre-clearance was simple. Instead of waiting for a discriminatory voting rule to hurt people and then require somebody to sue, certain jurisdictions with histories of discrimination had to clear covering voting changes beforehand. That was prevalent. Once that protection disappeared in Holder, that burden shifted. Instead of stopping certain discriminatory changes before implementing, voters and civil rights organizations could be forced to fight them after the fact. That distinction matters enormously with elections because elections have dates. If somebody wins a voting rights case 2 years after an election, you cannot travel back in time and give somebody the vote they should have been able to cast. Voting discrimination has also changed. Nobody has to hang a sign outside a courtroom saying black people can't vote. Modern disputes can involve district maps, which they started, registration requirements, voter roll maintenance, polling location, ballot requirements, election procedure. All these things can be put into place in order to beat people from voting. Okay, all due to the Supreme Court. The methods become more sophisticated, which means the legal protections have to be strong enough to recognize discrimination without requiring somebody to walk into a courtroom carrying a 1960 literacy test as evidence. That is why I don't take the weakening of these voting rights protections lightly. Now, combine voting rights decisions with what is happening around mail-in ballot, and then add the recent concern about whether federal forces could become involved around elections. I want to be careful here, too. Donald Trump has not announced that he is sending troops to polling places. He said something about sending 1,000 people, 1,000 election watchers, poll watchers. But elected officials have considered the possibility serious enough to seek assurances that federal forces will not be used as polling locations or to seize election material. That alone should tell us how strange this political movement has become. If this administration ever crossed that line, somebody is going to sue. If the legal fight became significant enough, where might it ultimately end? In the hands of the Supreme Court. That brings me to why expanding the Supreme Court is the solution I support. Because complaining about the current court without explaining what expansion actually accomplishes doesn't get us anywhere. The first advantage of expanding the court is that it reduces the amount of power concentrated in each individual justice. This is one of the strongest arguments for expansion, and I don't think Democrats make this enough. With 9 Supreme Court justices, 5 people can form a majority that changes constitutional law for the entire country. 5 people can make a decision that Congress cannot simply override if the decision resets on constitutional interpretation. Those 5 people can serve for decades. Please hit the like and the share. Subscribe. That is an incredible amount of power per person. If we expand the Supreme Court to 13 people, each justice becomes a smaller part of the institution. One appointment matters less and less. One retirement matters less. One unexpected vacancy matters less. Supreme Court vacancies have become political emergencies because every seat carries so much weight. Presidents and senators calculate whether an aging justice will survive until the next administration. Americans watch the health of individual justices because one vacancy can alter constitutional law for a generation. Me personally, I believe we should have 2 or 3 Supreme Court groups of Supreme Court justices. I think we should have a group of 13 here and a group of 13 here, and the cases that come should vary between the 3 or 2 groups of justices. That way, you never know what you can never rig the system. All of the system, you got 13 on this court, 13 on this court, and 13 on this court, and that way, you never know what case comes to whatever judge. You never know what case comes to whatever group. And so you never can predict the outcome. Okay? 3 different courts, Supreme Courts, all under, 20, all of them under 26 judges. And they all switch and swap on each case, different case. It just ain't all 9 go on this one case. No, you're subject to be on this case. You're subject to be on this case, blah, blah, blah. They got to switch it up somehow. They just got to switch it up somehow. This is ridiculous. Nobody's heartbeat should have that much influence over the American law. A larger court would not eliminate the importance of vacancies, but it would dilute their impact. One seat out of 13 or 26 simply carries less institutional weight than one seat out of 9. The second advantage is to the expansion. It can break the current 6-3 ideological dominance. That is absolutely one of the reasons I support it. I want more liberal, open-minded judges. I want more judges who view voting rights differently from this conservative majority. I want more justices who are cautious about expanding presidential authority. I want more justices who take federal civil rights protection seriously. I want more liberal constitutional thinkers involved when these major questions are decided. I don't consider that embarrassing or dishonest. I'm just being straight up. Conservatives spent decades building an organized political and legal movement specifically designed to put conservative judges on the federal bench. They understood that courts matter. The Democrats acting ashamed to admit that judicial philosophy matters doesn't make us principled. It makes us late to the fucking game. And everybody else has been attending for 50 years. Get your ass in the game, Democrats. Adding 4 seats or 17 seats, whatever. Adding these seats could create a much more ideological balanced court. It would mean neither side could simply assume that a 6-member block controls the outcome before oral arguments even begin. And balanced does not mean liberals win every case. Liberal justices disagree with each other. Conservative justices disagree with each other. A larger, more balanced court could create different coalitions depending on the legal question. That is a healthier than one ideological bloc maintaining a comfortable majority for decades and decades. The third advantage to expand the court is it gives us more legal perspectives. 13 or 17 qualified judges can bring more professional backgrounds and more approaches to the law than 9. That does not mean we lower our qualifications. It means we increase the number of highly qualified people participating in these decisions. There's nothing magical about 9 people being uniquely capable of deciding constitutional cases, while 13 would somehow become chaos. The federal judiciary already has 13 judicial circuits, and each Supreme Court justice is responsible for emergency application and other matters from one or more circuits. 13 Supreme Court seats would therefore have at least a reasonable structural basis. It isn't constitutionally required, but it isn't some number somebody just randomly pulled out of the air. The fourth advantage is that the expansion reduces the lottery involved in Supreme Court appointments. And it's a big lottery. Please hit the like and the subscribe, please. Right now, presidents don't receive appointments on any predictable schedule. A president might get 3 Supreme Court appointments in 4 years. Another president might get 1. Another could theoretically get none. Barack Obama didn't get none. That means the ideological direction of constitutional law can depend heavily on when a justice happens to retire or die. Think about how absurd this is, how absurd it is right now. We have created a system where the constitutional direction of the country, with hundreds of millions of people, can turn partly on the timing of one's a person's retirement. A lower court does not completely solve that problem, but again, it dilutes it. One appointment becomes less capable of transforming the entire court. If expansion were eventually combined with a legally sound system of regularized appointments, the country could reduce the political frenzy surrounding every Supreme Court vacancy even further. The fifth advantage is that expansion gives Congress a way to reassert its own constitutional role. The Supreme Court checks Congress all the time. It can strike down federal laws. It can interpret congressional passes. It can limit what Congress is allowed to do. That is a part of our system, right? But checks and balances don't mean the Supreme Court checks everybody while everybody else politely leaves the Supreme Court alone. Congress has constitutional authority over important parts of the federal judiciary, right? Including the number of Supreme Court judges. Using that authority is not overthrowing the judiciary. It is Congress expressing its own power. If Congress passes a law expanding the Supreme Court and the president signs it, that is legislation moving through the congressional process. People can oppose it. Senators can vote against it. Members of Congress can campaign against it. Voters can punish politicians for it. But don't tell me the process itself is illegitimate. It's not. The sixth advantage is the expansion can be tied to a broader court reform. If we're going to expand it, then let's deal with the other problems at the same time. We should have stronger ethical requirements. What is his name? Clarence Thomas taking bribes from those rich millionaires? No. We should have stronger ethical requirements. His wife taking bribes or his wife doing stuff to the bidding, his wife being MAGA. We should have clear disclosure requirements. We should have transparent recusal standards so Americans understand why a justice participates in a case despite possible ethical conflicts. Supreme Court justices hold some of the most powerful positions in the federal government. Expecting strong ethical standards from them should not be controversial, okay? I don't want Congress telling judges how to decide cases. Judicial independence matters, but independence does not mean absence of accountability. Those are two different things. The seventh advantage is that the expansion could make the court more representative of the range of legal thought throughout the United States. I want to be precise about what I mean by representation because Supreme Court justices are not members of Congress. Their job is not to conduct opinion pieces, polls, and voter accountability surveys. But judicial philosophy matters and the range of philosophies on the Supreme Court matter. Right now, the conservative legal thought has 6 conservative seats and 3 liberal. That is a substantial imbalance. I'm sorry, it just is. Adding more liberal thinkers would not guarantee liberal outcomes. What it would do is make sure that when major questions involving voting, presidential power, civil rights, federal authority are decided, one ideological perspective doesn't begin every case with a commanding numerical advantage. The 8th reason why we should expand the court is to make Supreme Court decisions less dependent on a tiny number of people. This comes back to the central problem. 9 is too small of a number for the power this institution exercises. We have 13 federal circuits. We have hundreds of federal judges. We have 50 states and hundreds of millions of citizens. Yet some of the most important constitutional questions in the country can ultimately be decided by a 5-person majority. 5. That is fewer people than some families need to decide where they're eating that night, Thanksgiving dinner. And somehow we decided 5 people can settle enormous constitutional questions for the entire country for decades. That's what we're doing. Expanding to 13 judges doesn't make the court democratic. It isn't supposed to be another legislature. It simply spreads the enormous judicial authority among more people. I see that as an advantage, not a problem. Now, there's a serious argument against everything I just said, and we need to address it instead of pretending it doesn't exist, okay? If Democrats expand the Supreme Court, Republicans could expand it again when they regain power. That's true. If Democrats move from 9 to 13, Republicans could say someday, then we're going to 15. Then Democrats could come back and say 17. Pretty soon, oral arguments require bleachers. That is a legitimate danger. But there are 2 sides to the argument. The danger of changing an institution has to be compared with the danger of not changing it. Doing nothing is not neutral. Leaving the court at 9 means leaving the 6-3 conservative majority in place potentially for years and years. Leaving it alone means continuing to allow individual vacancies to cause enormous political consequences. Leaving it alone means accepting an institution where 5 people can make constitutional decisions affecting the entire country. So when somebody tells me expansion is risky, I agree. Then my question is what compared to what? Because the present system has risks too. I would rather have a serious political fight over a 13-member Supreme Court justice than spend the next 20 years complaining about a 6-3 conservative majority while pretending Congress is powerless to change anything. Congress isn't powerless. It has chosen not to use the power. This Republican administration, Congress, has chosen not to use power. That's different. And I especially don't want to hear that expanding the court would suddenly politicize the Supreme Court. Supreme Court appointment process is already political. Presidents nominate judges. Senators confirm them. Presidential candidates campaign on the kind of judges they will appoint. Interest groups spend enormous amounts of money on judicial nominations. Senate leaders decide whether nominations receive hearings, okay? We watched Mitch McConnell refuse to move Merrick Garland's nomination in 2016 because it was an election year and because it was Barack Obama. But then he turned around and confirmed Amy Barrett within 3 months after the 2020 election. Whatever you think about those decisions, don't tell me the Supreme Court appointment somehow exists outside of politics. They don't. So Democrats need to stop being afraid of this conversation. I don't want Democrats saying we have to expand the court because we don't like conservatives. No, that argument is too shallow. The argument should be specific. 9 people have too much individual power. A 6-3 ideological majority has too much long-term control. Individual vacancies have become too consequential. The court is deciding increasingly important questions about presidential authority and voting. Congress has constitutional authority to change the number of justices. An expansion to 13 would distribute that power among more people while allowing a broader range of judicial philosophies under the court. I believe personally it should be 2 justices. It should be 13 and 13. It should be 26. It should be 26 judges. And the cases that come to them should be swip and swap. Whenever they come in, you swip and swap. Whichever one comes in under this one, whichever one comes under this one, and then that's how they should go. It should never be a 9-panel Supreme Court. It should be expanded to 13, or it should be expanded to 2 different courts, 2 different Supreme Court, 13 over here and 13 over here. Okay, that way we get an even broad balance of perspectives, a broad coalition of the United States. Okay, because the 6 Supreme Court justices, the conservative justices, don't represent the 300 million of us. They only represent a small slither of us. They don't represent the bulk of us. We need representation of all people in this country. So that's the argument. 13, 13, or just 13, period. That's my argument. And now the voting issue makes that argument more urgent. This voting issue that just happened. We're heading towards the 2026 election. Midterms. While the administration is trying to change aspects of voting, mail-in voting. States are suing, federal judges are issuing injunctions, Supreme Court is deciding whether those injunctions can stand, and voters are left wondering what the rules will ultimately be. That's exactly the wrong time to have an ideological, lopsided Supreme Court holding this much power. I want more liberal thinkers on the court because the liberal side of American legal thought deserves more than 3 seats out of the 9 when questions this controversial are being decided. I want 13 justices because I want each individual justice to matter less and less. I want 13 because I don't want the death of one or the retirement of one person turning every presidential election into a fight over the future of the constitutional law. I want 13 because the country has 13 federal circuits and a vastly larger federal system than it had when Congress settled on 9 seats in 1869. I want 13 because more qualified judges mean more perspectives involved in deciding difficult cases. I want 13 because 6-3 is not balanced. I want an expanded Supreme Court because Congress has the authority to do it. Nobody has to sneak into the Supreme Court in the middle of the night and install 4 folded chairs. Pass a bill. Debate it publicly. Let every senator put their vote on the record. Let every member of the House put their vote on record. Let the president sign it. Then nominate 4 qualified justices and put them through the confirmation process. That is government functioning through the process established by law. People can call it court packing if they fucking want to. Don't nobody give a damn. That phrase don't scare me. I don't give a damn about that. If packing means illegally removing justices because I don't like their decisions, I oppose that. If packing means Congress lawfully increases the number of Supreme Court seats using authority Congress has possessed since the beginning of the country, then we can have that argument all day long. Because I'm not suggesting we remove conservative justices and replace them with liberals. I am saying leave the current justices where they are and add more seats. Either add 4 more to make it 13 or add 4 more here to make it 13 and then add another 13. And then they swip and swap cases. You don't get all the cases. You don't get all the cases. Y'all swip and swap cases. That way you can't predict the outcome. Okay? Let the liberals make or the conservatives make their arguments for this expansion. I simply don't want six conservative justices holding a permanent 2-to-1 numerical advantage when 6 of those justices don't represent 200 million of us. 6 Supreme Court justices, conservative justices, don't represent 200 million of us. And I especially don't want the arrangement treated as though questioning it is somehow an attack on the Constitution when the Constitution itself leaves the number of justices up to Congress. Please hit the like and the subscribe button, please and thank you. I appreciate it. The Supreme Court's own website tells you Congress determines its size. The Supreme Court website does that. The first court had 6 justices. Congress changed the number several times, and 9 has existed since 1869. So we're not talking about destroying the Supreme Court. We're talking about changing a number. A number Congress has changed before. A number Congress has the authority to change again. And I think the advantages now outweigh the risks. Expansion reduces the importance of individual justices. It reduces the effect of individual vacancies. It creates room for more judicial philosophies. It can break the present 6-to-3 ideological stance. It can accomplish stronger ethics and transparency rules. It can give Congress back some leverage in a system where the Supreme Court has enormous power over both the Congress and the presidency. Most importantly, expansion recognizes the problem staring us in the face. This Supreme Court has become too important to leave this small and this ideological to be. The Supreme Court is just too small for it to be this ideologically lopsided. We need balance in that court. This is why I want it to be expanded. Not because every conservative justice is bad. That's not what I'm saying. Not because every liberal justice is good. Not because I expect the Supreme Court to give Democrats whatever Democrats want. I wanted to expand it because no 6 people sharing one broad judicial philosophy should have this much long-term control over questions involving voting rights, presidential power, civil rights powers, and the limits of government. And 4 seats. Add 4 seats. Bring it to 13. Or add the 4 seats to that 9 and then make another 13 set of justices. Add qualified liberal thinkers who can challenge this conservative majority. Spread the power around, make individual appointments less consequential, and stop acting like a number Congress picked in 1869 is the one part of the American government that's forbidden to be reconsidered. The Supreme Court does not need to disappear. I'm not saying that. The current 6-to-3 control does. That is why I support expanding the Supreme Court. And it should happen when we get the majorities in January. It should happen then. Because it's time. It's just time. We need a balanced thing. I say 13-13, and then they swap cases. Whatever case comes in, you're gonna hear it. Whatever case comes in, you're gonna, and they go 1 and 1. That way you never know who has what decision to make. So please hit the like and subscribe. I have content like this, but I work, so when I have a live, please put on the notifications of all so you can hear the content. Okay. They're not doing anything to hurt our country. Why would you? Yeah, they're doing plenty to hurt our country. If you don't understand that, I can't help you. I can't help. Oh, I appreciate it. Dawn Walker 6058, new member. Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Hello, TCW 4731. Hello. Hi, Jester is Speak 2015. Sob 1057. Hello, 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 hello. Okay. RBG didn't want to leave her position. I don't know who that is. Oh, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She died. Okay. Are you really trying to change something that's been work? Yeah, it's been changed before. Black America. It could be changed again. It could be changed again. All of these things could be changed again. It sounds stupid. Okay. They represent 70% of us. No, they don't represent 70% of us. That's the problem. 6 judges. So if you put it in perspective, 9 judges, 300 million people, 3 judges represent 1 million people. So 6 conservative justices represent 200 million people. There's not 200 million conservative people in this country. So that makes no sense. We need a balanced Supreme Court. We need a balanced Supreme Court where we have 6 and 6, and then we have one deciding judge. And that one deciding judge is factoring. Each person changes the deciding judge. Okay. We're trying to get away from more government. Nobody's getting away from more government. Nobody's doing that. If they added 4 more, the right would still hold more than half. What you're forgetting is just over 30% of population votes Democrat. At the left has no chance. There's only 30% that vote Democrat. There's the bulk of people who vote in this country are independent. So Republican are not the majority, and neither are Democrats. It's the independents, the ones that could go either way, that particularly control our elections. So it's not a flex. So conservative, it's too many conservatives that hold power in this country, and they shouldn't. They should only hold 1/3. Okay, they're not doing anything that hurt our country. Yes, they are. Okay, yes, they are. Mr. Stein, that's what y'all don't understand. Yes, they are. Let me see. You're adding more red tape, sister. More red tape. Yeah, that's not adding more red tape. I don't believe one Supreme Court should have control of all of it. I think we should have more than one. I think because whatever cases come to this court, see, right now this is what can be. This is the argument people can make. Because you got 6 conservative judges. 6 conservative judges. If something comes down that the president likes 9 times out of 10, they might even approve it. The propensity for them to go with a conservative mind frame is 6 of them. 9 times out of 10, they are. I want somebody who's independent, and I never know how they're going to vote because they're independent of thought. Conservatives have conservative thought. Democrats have democratic thought. I want an independent thought. I want somebody who's independent, who we can't depend on you. You vote one way, you vote one way, you vote one way, you vote one way. We can't depend on your vote. We know that you're an independent thinker. This is what we need. Okay. We want Democrats to find. We don't want Democrat socialists, and that's all we got. It must be cleaned out. Right? You don't even know what a democratic socialist is for you to come up and even say it. It don't even make sense. Some of y'all need to do y'all reading and research. Just say anything. Y'all don't even know what a democratic socialist does or what they believe in. That's wild. And for the record, most of our economy has socialism built into it. So you guys keep talking about democratic socialists. We already have socialism here. That's just a goofy logic. But please hit the like and the share. I appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow night. I will be back tomorrow night. Yes, I will. I'm pulling things together, getting my head out of my ass, trying to get my lives together and do all those good things. I appreciate you guys. If you like and share, I appreciate you. And I will be back with more content tomorrow. I appreciate you guys. I do. I appreciate you guys. Yes, I do.